Welcome back to What Would You Ask podcast. My next guest is the creator of Mensch on a Bench. Remember that one? It was one of my favorite episodes, actually. I was just telling Neal I had the opportunity to see the update last night late. I'm like, hey, that's really cool. After my crack staff of people gave me all the videos and updates, I got to see one live that I couldn't see. My crack staff from 2 local college kids. Anyway, Mensch on a Bench, you guys know it's that Jewish toy, right? Promotes, happiness and good values and good morals and the story of Hanukkah. And you know what? It's as a Catholic, why not give our Jewish friends the opportunity to have something like that? We have that thing that my kids hide all over the house and I'm not supposed to touch it. I think it's an elf on a shelf or something. But I think this is ingenious, by the way. And we're going to talk to Neal about it. And as he goes through his journey, what it was like and what's it doing today and where you guys can get it. Holiday season is right around the corner. So he appeared in ABC's hit show, of course, Shark Tank, season 6, episode 12. Not sure why we have to have the episode on here, but we exactly know where to find Neal and Mensch on a Bench now. Neal Hoffman, welcome to What Would You Ask podcast. Glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So let's jump right in. I did not articulate, I don't think Mensch on a Bench, I've given it enough credit as it deserves. Anything you would add to it and help us understand what you brought into the tank back then? What was Mensch on a Bench represented as back then?
So first of all, Mensch in Yiddish means good or honorable person. So it's the highest compliment you give somebody in Yiddish. And when I launched Mensch on a Bench, Elf on the Shelf was really at its peak. And they have an incredible product. They are allowing Christian families to create these great memories. And Jewish families really felt left out. So the whole idea came when my son, we were in the store and he ran up to me and said, hey, Dad, can we get an Elf on the Shelf? And I was like, no, man, we're Jewish. You can get a Mensch on a Bench. And I was just messing around.
You just said Mensch on a Bench just like that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
And that was the inspiration, and I fell in love with it on the spot. So really the idea goes to, if you look at Christianity or secular society and you look at the holidays, there's so many cool characters, right? With Rudolph and elves and Frosty and Santa, and you could keep going. And for Jews, we got the Old Testament, but we don't have any new characters. And there was an opportunity to introduce a new character to have some fun with and to give Jewish families a tool to celebrate themselves and celebrate their holidays with.
I think it's awesome. The question, Neal, that that I have, and I know a lot of the viewers and listeners, that's what happens when you put those two words together, is we all have great ideas like that. Like I was talking to, it's not Julie, I forgot her name, Doped, the cookie dough she's on a mission, right? She's got, she deals with all kind of mental illness and works very closely with a lot of organizations helping them out and literally has a mission. And it was so nice to visit with her. But she had the idea of having cookie dough and eating that. And every single person that ever baked a cake when they were little or their mom ate cookie dough and said, oh my God, I'd love to be able to sell this, right? We all had that idea. The difference is she executed on it, right? And she went out and did that. Similarly, I'm sure in the Jewish community, somebody said, hey, when they saw Elf, we should have something. What was that execution like to go out and get it done?
Yeah, so, I think a lot of entrepreneurs deal with that problem, and inventors, that we have ideas all day, and you need to decide, is this the one that I want to put all my energy into? And once you decide it is the one, then how do you put some stage gates in there so that you figure out as quickly as possible if it's a good idea or a bad idea? And I can talk about that and how I used Kickstarter to do that. For me, I had the idea. I went back that night and wrote the book because I knew that Mensch would need a reason for being. And I wanted to use it as a tool to teach my son about Hanukkah. So the book is educational. It's all about the Mensch, and every night the Maccabees go to bed and the oil remains lit, and he watches over the oil for them. And when they wake up, he teaches them about dreidel or menorahs or presence or geld, and he introduces a concept, and it becomes educational. And that was where we anchored it. And it started with really, I made a call to a guy who had a connection in China. He made one prototype for me for $500. And I went on Kickstarter with a video and a picture to see if other people were interested enough that we could get this thing off the ground. And we sold 300 on Kickstarter, which was enough to raise $18,000. I invested some of my own money as well, and we bought 1,000 dolls. Ended up with 700 extra dolls in my basement. And I went out and started the PR machine. It caught fire, and we blew through those 700 dolls at $36 in 10 days. Jeez. So I had done 25 grand in 10 days while I was working a full-time job. Then I called the local high school entrepreneurship class. They came over and helped me pack all these boxes and get them out the door. And then we started going out to major retailers using that little bit of success we had on Kickstarter to tell the story of why they should carry it. So a lot of times I'll tell people, don't go out and buy 10,000 of what you think is a really good idea. Buy 100 or 1,000 and test it and grow as you see success, but don't assume success going in.
How important was it for you to be able to execute because of your background as a Hasbro exec and all of that stuff? Did it make the road easier? I'm not sure. I don't want to say easier because it certainly wasn't easy, but
absolutely. I mean, I think I had a couple competitors early on. I had Maccabee on the Mantle. I had the gift-giving Gollum. And it wasn't necessarily a fair playing field, right? Because I had experience at Procter & Gamble, at Hasbro Toys. I have a knack for PR. So we went out and we used our humor and the catchiness of the name to just start getting PR. And we are now the most publicized brand to ever come out of Shark Tank.
Is that right? Wow. Yeah. Huh.
Over 3 billion media hits. Now, the other thing is, when I had the idea for Mensch on a Bench, I went and tried to get the domain name, and somebody else had the domain name. So somebody else had the same idea around the same time I did. I filed the trademark. It turns out I filed the trademark before anybody else, and that's what counts. So it turns out they couldn't do anything with that domain name, and they ended up selling it to me down the line. And someone else filed the trademark on Mensch on a Bench 3 days after I did.
Wow.
It was, was I unique in my thinking? No. I mean, other people had the same name. Other people had the same concept. And then we were battling to see who could break through. And I broke through because I had the trademark. And then I think because I had the more unique item that was fun and funny and resonated with consumers and the media.
That's awesome. Take us through now where this conceptual thing turns into reality. We do Kickstarter. We pick up almost 20 grand. Where is Shark Tank in the future of this? Is it a year out? Is it 6 months? Are you in the process already while you do this? Tell us about it.
Between Kickstarter and then we sold those $700, that did about $50,000 worth of sales. We also got pre-orders for next year's items on the website for like another $1,000. So we had brought in almost another $50,000. So all of a sudden I'm sitting on $100,000 and I can fund my next run without having to go broke. I started talking to the retailers. I got commitment from the retailers, and I decided to apply to Shark Tank. And I'll tell people, use your connections, right? And networking is so, so important. And I hate this idea of, that the system's rigged and old boys club, right? I don't necessarily think that's true. I think if you're willing to hustle and meet people and put yourself out there, people will absolutely help you and they want you to win. so I networked my way to someone who worked on Shark Tank. So I didn't even go through the normal process. I got a screening interview from an associate producer whose only job was to see if I was real or not. And I told her a story of how I had $750,000 in purchase orders. I had a fun and funny product. It was visual. She passed me on to the producers, and we got on the show. And I think where 40,000 people apply every year, your chances of getting on are very low. But I knew that they had a holiday show, and I know within the holiday show they like to have one Jewish segment. And I know the number of people who are going to Shark Tank with Jewish-specific products are probably a handful, right? So instead of trying to get one of those 100 spots out of 40,000, I was trying to get 1 out of 5 and beat out those other Jewish businesses, which I was able to do. And also understanding that it's entertainment, right? They want fun and funny products. And I told them, I was like, if you want me to come on doing the Hoffman and Gila, we'll entertain your audience, and we'll drive my business.
There you go. We are speaking with Neal Hoffman, the creator of Mensch on a Bench. If you guys want to get your questions answered by your favorite Shark Tank entrepreneur, head to our website at whatwouldyoaskpodcast.com and all the different social media. What Would You Ask? We're out there at Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all the places my kids know that I don't know. So you'll find us out there, and there's all the membership information and stuff like that. And get your questions on here and get folks like Neal, who created something really special and really cool. And now he's moving forward with it. We're going to hear how Mensch on a Bench has evolved at the end of the program here. Let's get into the journey. So everybody wants to know the audition process. You kind of took us through that. Now you get the invite out to LA, and we're reminded, everybody that listens to this podcast knows, especially with the Shark Tank series, they end every call, every interaction with saying, this doesn't guarantee that you're going to be on the show. It doesn't guarantee, right? So we know that. Even when you're done, you walk off stage. You did a fantastic job, Neal. Great job. It's going to be awesome. It doesn't guarantee you're going to be on the show, though. But anyway, take us through. You get to LA. How long are you there? Did you go through the producer, kind of, what do you call it when you do something ahead of the time you're going to do it?
So I got to LA, and it was really cool. I got to meet some other fellow entrepreneurs. I'll tell you, if you have the chance, and it sounds like you do, to talk to some of these Shark Tank companies, these are some of the most interesting people I've ever met in my life. All share this kind of same drive, that just a sheer force of will to make something happen. And it doesn't really matter what it is, but they're so interesting in all of their stories. So met some really interesting people. I was really nervous. I was practicing my pitch over and over. And turns out the day before you go on, you do your pitch in front of Clay Newble, who is the executive producer. And I think what I didn't totally realize was that's your final audition, right? So they've flown you out there. They know you are close. And now Clay makes the decision of whether you're going to make it. So I remember being in this room, and they're like, you got all your props. They're like, Neal, let's pretend like it's the real thing. Let's go. And right before I went on, my producer said to me, they're like, hey, man, we don't want you to turn it up to 10. We want you to turn it up to 11 right now. Just go all out. And I was like, all right, man, you want a dancing Jew, you'll get a dancing Jew. and I went out, and I was like, all right, welcome. Let's have some Hanukkah to Hanukkah. And I went all out. And I was having fun, and I don't think I realized how serious it was. And then Clay Newble looked at me, and he like clapped. He's like, Neal, if I could bring you out here every week to teach people how to give their pitch, I would do it. That was awesome. And I think that might be the greatest compliment I've ever gotten, right? I didn't realize it at the time. And then my producers were like, you're on tomorrow. So now I've heard the stories of people, because we all talk, right? So there are people who say they're going to record, and then they get bumped to the next day, and then they never make it. And I'm a ball of nerves anyway. So I actually asked if I could go first the next day. And they were like, yeah, nobody else asked. Sure. So I knew I was guaranteed to be on. So we get there, and, you're sitting in your trailer for a couple hours ahead of time. They take you in their little cart. You go out to Shark Tank. You're in the hallway. I got my headphones on, trying to psych myself out. You walk down the fish tank hallway, and they don't play the music when you're walking down. So you got to do it in your head. And I really did. I think everybody does. Like, bump, 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 bump. And you walk in, and they're like, okay, stand on the X. So you stand on the X. They're like, do not talk to the sharks. So I'm staring down each shark, trying to look friendly. I'm like smiling at each one. And my product is hidden. I was going to have a big reveal. So they don't know why I'm there. And I'm like sweating. And it really is the longest 30 to 60 seconds of your life, where the sharks must do this all the time. So to them, it's no big deal. But to me, I was definitely pins and needles. And then they said, go. And I kind of went into my song and dance, which I could probably do it now. I memorized. I had every action, every intonation on every word memorized, and it was good. It was really good. And they are not supposed to interrupt you.
Right.
What? You get 90 seconds, and then they can tear into you. But they interrupted me twice, and it kind of threw me off. But it was still fun and funny, and we went into it. And so I finished, and I think, because I've seen 10 million episodes, or I've watched literally every single episode at that point, that they're going to ask me how I came up with the idea, because that's what anybody would ask, right? And when they show you the actual show and they air it in chronological order. That's not how they actually ask the questions. They ask the questions kind of whatever comes to their mind. So the first question was by Barbara. Barbara looks at me and she goes, "Is this offensive? This looks offensive to me." And in my wildest dreams, I never thought that would be the first question, if a question at all.
Yeah.
And then Mark, who is Jewish, turns and goes, "Of course this is offensive." So now I'm immediately on the defensive, and I'm answering questions about why it's not offensive instead of saying kind of how we start our conversation. Elf on a Shelf had created this great tradition, and now we have an alternative, and telling my story of how it got started. They knocked me right off kilter, and it was just defense for about a half an hour. And I just couldn't get my footing. And I was sweating, and they had to stop filming to give me a napkin to wipe the sweat off. I mean, that's how bad it was. And I thought about turning around and walking out. It was going so bad.
Jeez. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And Laurie asked me a question, and again, it was out of order. She said, "Well, what retailers are you in?" And I said, "Well, Laurie, I'll absolutely answer your question, but do you mind if I just take a step back, tell you how I came up with this idea, how we've gotten to this point, and then how we've gotten into the retailers?" And she was like, "Okay, sure." And then I was able to really ground it and tell my story and start to make sense. And then somehow they asked about my background. I talked about how I'd been at Hasbro, and I got out the fact that I had $750,000 in purchase orders. And between those things, the conversation suddenly shifted, and I suddenly had credibility, and it became a much better conversation for me. But it was a battle.
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought, first of all, I thought you did a great job. And one thing about, I've interviewed now over 40 entrepreneurs, and I couldn't agree more with your assessment of the vast differences in the people, but the drive of every one of them and the commitment to their product. And some of them go beyond just the product and their mission. It's like you, right? You did it not only to provide the Jewish community with you did it for that, but it's also educational, and there's a lot wrapped around it. But I'll say couple things. One is I thought you did a really good job with the presentation. Two, I thought the reveal was definitely the way to go. You don't want them staring at them, identifying that's a Mensch. Oh, I get it, right? And then discussing it. Pulling that sheet off like you did was right on. The other thing that we're starting to learn as a group ourselves in this Shark Tank series is the fact that one of the biggest, and I asked this to many people, is there any misconceptions or the things you saw in studio that we don't see? And because people want to really get an understanding, but the rapid fire of the questions is every single, people say you don't have any idea. I mean, you see them they're on top of each other, talking to each other. Sometimes you see them both talking, but that's because they have to get that question in. Think about the stuff that's on the production floor, right? Because there's too much going on, but every entrepreneur, Neal, says it's a shooting range in there. I mean, it's rapid fire. They all want to get their questions answered. So I'll say that, and I mean, you can give some feedback. And the second thing I'll say is when you mentioned Hasbro, you're an executive. I think you said something along the lines of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is right now I'm part-time on the, I spend some time there and sometimes at Hasbro. That Kevin immediately gravitated to you. Like he was like, I worked at wherever he worked, Mattel or whatever. And there was definitely instant credibility. Did you feel, you must've felt that, right?
Yeah. So the first part of it is, it absolutely is rapid fire. It's not chronological, which I wasn't prepared for. You have these 5 people who, in any other circumstance besides Shark Tank, they are the most important person in the room. They're used to all their questions being answered. They're used to being kind of the center of the universe, which, hey, rightfully so, right? They're all big celebrities and successful business people. But then you put them all in together, and you almost have these warring planets that are all trying to throw out all these different ideas. And on top of that, they're really smart. They're trying to find out if you're real or fake, so they're trying to give you a hard time. And while this is the first time I've done this, at this point, they've probably done this a few thousand times. So they have all this experience and all this knowledge. So it was an overwhelming experience. And, to your point, I think once you start to win them over, it gets a little easier. Kevin was really interesting for me. So Kevin, I think, respected that I was at Hasbro. I worked at Even Flow on car seats and infant toys at the time. And I was working part-time on that, part-time on Mensch. And I said I was ready to quit my job if I got a deal on Shark Tank. And I think as I talked to Kevin, he respected that. And Kevin, who wanted no part of my business, but was so respectful and said to me, look, man, I really respect what you're doing here. You as a one-man operation have gotten into all these major stores. You have all these sales. You have great PR. Here's what I think. Don't quit your job, right? Keep doing this part-time. Pull $1 million out of it over the next few years, and then leverage that to kind of do your next thing. And it wasn't bad advice, right? He saw an item instead of a business. And, 8 years into this, we're still balancing that, right? We're still growing beyond that item into a business. So I think everything he said was legitimate. But I think he respected it and said, hey, I don't think you're in the right place. I don't think you need us. I think take your $1 million. You're a winner. You got the right attitude, right person. I'm just not going to give you any money. I don't think you need it, Yes. And I thought that was a cool answer.
I agree. Let's get to a few of the questions from the viewers and listeners. Mike from Hilton Head, South Carolina. Good question, Mike. Was there a weak area of your business that you thought may be concerning during the Q&A with the Sharks? I like that question.
No. I had prepared for everything. What threw me off was I didn't need their money, right? So because I had those pre-sales and I was far enough along, I had already cashed out my own 401k to fund the next year's inventory. So we were kind of past that. So when they said, what do you need the money for? I was like, well, I want to make a Mensch cartoon. And I want it to be the first Jewish animated special and have that come out every single year. And every single shark looked at me like, nope, we do not want to give you money for a cartoon.
And then the app, you mentioned the app too, right?
And well, we got to the app too, but they're like, we're not going to give it to you for the cartoon. And then Robert turned and goes, look, if you're willing to keep talking about having us invest in your toys, yeah, we could talk about that. And then I had to pivot, and I was like, sure, let's talk toys. Animation's off the table, right? Because you got to be flexible when you go in. So then Mark's like, well, what do you need the money for? Well, I rehearsed that answer. The answer was animation. So now I needed plan B. So I was like, well, maybe the app. And Mark's like, I don't want to do an app. And suddenly, like, that's where I started getting nervous because I hadn't planned for that line of questioning. So now I'm just fumbling, and I'm okay I'm pretty good on my toes, but not as good as Mark Cuban is. So that was the hardest part to prepare for. It wasn't a weakness in the business. It was a weakness in the way they reacted to the business and how I reacted to them.
Monica from Toronto, Canada wants to know, did you have a preference on which shark you made a deal with?
You know, I kind of, going in, really wanted Mark because he's Jewish. He has ties to the entertainment industry, and he has kids, and I thought that would be a good fit. Right within the first few seconds, he was not digging it. By the end, Mark had warmed up, but he was not feeling it. And Lori is such a product person that I didn't think this would be a QVC play, but I think Lori and I come from the same school of thought. So those were kind of the two that I had my eyes on. When I got the offer from Robert and Lori, that was great, but it was a terrible offer. I just literally had sales of the coming year was going to be close to $1 million, and they gave me a value on the company of $450,000. And I was like, look, I'm willing to take a cut to let you guys in, but not like that. That's just not fair. So I made them the counter and said, hey, instead of 30%, I'll give you 15%, but I'll take all the risk out for you. And
guarantee.
And I'll guarantee your payback. And I knew I could, right? Because with $1 million in sales, I was going to bring in profit that year, and I could just take that profit, pay them right back. And I'm willing to give them the 15% to have the Shark Tank, boost. That's going to be worth a lot. So that's what I did. Barbara chimed in and said, hey, you're not going to have to do that. And I took the gamble and said, Barbara, I just made them a counter offer, and I think the fair thing to do is to let them answer.
Kevin had the best line when Barbara was going through her pitch. She was taking a little bit of time, and Kevin said, by the time Barbara finishes offering, the Mensch will be Catholic. I thought that was one of the best lines. That was pretty funny.
Barbara didn't like none of them liked the look of the character, which we did redo, and looks a lot better.
I saw that in the update. It really does. It's amazing what those people see, because I looked at it when you were carrying it around and stuff, and I looked at when they showed the display. I didn't really go, why doesn't it have a big smile on its face? But when you see it on the end cap in the retail store, when you do the update, it's why you go, wow, that's a much happier looking Mensch.
So, and that's a product of not being so close to your own item that you're able to take the critique and say, yep, you know what, you're right, I can do better. But then she also said, hey, kids don't like rules, I want to get rid of the rules. And I was like,
that's right.
Here, right? The rules are all about how you play with him and interact with Judaism. So it made me a little nervous because, nothing on my project was sacred. There was very little I wasn't willing to change and take input on, but having some kind of parameters and rules seemed important to me, especially given how Elf on a Shelf worked.
Not only that, but she wanted to rewrite the book. She's like, I need the approval to rewrite this book. And it's like, hold on a second, anyway. Patrick, Fargo, North Dakota. I don't think we've had Fargo, North Dakota on the show. Neal, what was your most memorable moment on or off camera while being in the tank?
I'm gonna answer this a little differently. It wasn't in the tank. The most memorable moment happened a couple years ago when Robert and I got to go to Fenway Park and throw out the first pitch at Fenway Park. And that was such an incredible – I'm from Boston, and it was such a cool thing to do. And to think about that walking down Shark Tank, and yeah, that's a cool experience, but then it's over, right?
Yep.
And it's 15 minutes. So can you make that 15 minutes last longer? And to be like, look, that was 3 years ago, and now I'm throwing out the first pitch at Fenway. That was awesome. And then I got to go to the White House Hanukkah party, and sneaking the Mensch on a bench into the White House and then leaving it in the White House library, I thought was pretty cool as well.
That's pretty slick. Tell us about the phone call that, first of all, I grew up in New York City Metro, so I'm a diehard Yankee fan. But I also went to school at Northeastern, so blah, blah, blah. And I love Boston, and my New York friends, deal with it. Tell us about the phone call that you're going to go to Fenway Park. I mean, it's the iconic set. I guess, Wrigley would be there too, but come on. I mean, that's like, for a Boston guy, that's it. You've made it, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about who does Robert tell you that? Does a producer tell you that? Like, we'd like you to be part of this. Tell us about it.
It was the Boston Red Sox called me, and it was someone from their ticket office said, hey, we are doing a Jewish Heritage Night, and we're trying to figure out how to, make it more exciting. Would you like to partake? It's like, absolutely. Right. And usually you would ask for a licensing fee or whatever. I waived it all. I was, we'll do it for free. and then, so we started talking. I was like, I have the life-size Mensch. We could bring him out there. And then we kept talking. I was like, well, we could do, see, I got it right here. If we did giveaways that were the Mensch on a Bench bobbleheads.
Oh, that's cool.
Doing the bobbleheads. And then I said to him, well, could we have the Mensch do the first pitch? And they're like, yeah, let's look and see if we can do that. And then I called Robert and was like, hey, I think we're going to get the first pitch at Fenway. Do you want to come down and be part of this? Robert was like, yeah, I want to be part of it. Because we don't send Robert a lot of money, right? We're not one of those big companies. What we do is we're giving Robert an experience he otherwise wouldn't have, right? And that's what Robert cares about, right? He's a multimillionaire. He has everything he could possibly want.
Right.
But he hasn't been to Fenway throwing out the first pitch.
Yeah.
So Robert, he ended up getting a box and taking some of his clients from the Hirschbeck Group tech side and hosting them. And we had a great night. We threw out the first pitch. I had my wife there, my kids there.
Oh, my God.
For Robert's box, got to meet him and hang out and spend some time together. And it was awesome.
Good guy off camera? He seems like a real genuine guy when you.
He really is. He's a good guy.
That's cool. What a great experience for your family. That's really cool.
Because he's like, come up to my box. And I'm like saying to my wife, I was like, look, I want to talk to Robert and hang out with him. I don't have 3 hours of material to talk to Robert.
That's pretty good. So let's talk about the Shark Tank experience. You come out of the thing with the deal. By the way, before we do that, did the deal change in any substantive way? Was it the same kind of money, same kind of deal, or?
There were some minor changes, but because I guaranteed their payback, it really didn't matter if they gave me $1,000 or $150,000 because it all had to go back to them anyways. So I was willing to be flexible with them, and we were able to come to an agreement pretty easily.
And just quickly, tell us a little bit about, because I want to talk about the Shark Tank experience, and I also want you to talk about how the Mensch on the Bench has evolved. Tell us a little bit more about the due diligence that happens. We know these folks are not, calling you every day. They have teams people that do just Shark Tank work. Tell us how quickly they're engaged. I've heard of some people that they were literally met at the end of the walkway by people from the teams. I've heard others called the next day or the next week. Tell us your experience.
Yeah, it's more difficult when you get multiple sharks involved, right?
Yep.
So now Robert has a team. Lori, although she's a team, her business side is led by her husband, Dan. So Dan leads the due diligence side of things versus Robert's team. They've done hundreds of these, right? So they know what they're doing. So essentially, they give you this document. It's like, here's what we want. And you have to go back and find everything that and as an entrepreneur where you're scrappy, a lot of this I didn't have, right? To go back and create it, or, balance sheets and cash flow statements and income statements. It's like, I don't know. I didn't imagine that we were going to make it this far. So the coolest thing that happened during that process was Dan said to me, look, we do this, and we do it because everybody lies. Everybody's lying about something. Mm-hmm. We're trying to figure out what they're lying about. And he's like, I'll tell you, of everyone we work with, you didn't lie, right? Everything that you say is true. You haven't bullshit on any of these numbers. Our only concern is just the size of the Jewish community and, like, at what point we're going to saturate it with Mensches. So let's have that discussion about what the future looks like. I think your future estimates might be aggressive, but everything you've said has been spot on. And I think that got us off on a really good footing to begin with, where there was trust on both ends.
I didn't even ask you about this, and I'm interested in, have you widened this as a North American product to international? I imagine that's the case, and that's a move, right? Has that happened?
So we did ship to Canada for probably 4 years, and then the exchange rate and just the size of market just wasn't worth it. And we haven't really gone international because in order for Mensch to be successful, you need to have the elf on a shelf there making the Jews.
That's a good point.
That they're missing out on something. So when we go to, like, Israel and float the concept, it just doesn't work. They're like, oh, you got a Hasidic Jew dressed up, and great. So we've tried, but it didn't make sense. So instead, we've just focused on the U.S.
Makes sense. So let's get into the Shark Tank effect. What was that like? Did they warn you about it's going to be a flood of orders. People are going to be emailing, calling. There's going to be stress on the servers for your website. Tell us about your experience once you air.
Sure. Everybody prepares you for it. Didn't matter because my website still crashed. My sales, which I thought I would sell thousands and thousands of units online, wasn't there. So I had all these friends and family over. Meanwhile, I'm trying to watch the website and see what's selling, and my sales are crap. And I remember that night I was so disappointed. And I had to pretend like I was so happy, but I was like, man, I think we got a problem. And what happened was everyone went out and bought them at store and bought it on Amazon, bought it at Target online, and we ended up selling through. And we, to be honest, made too much that year. But we ended up selling through it all, and it ended up going great. And we got tons of press, and we were able to leverage Shark Tank into more press. What's cool about Hanukkah is because it's every year we're able to go back to the press and say, hey, we have new items, new things to talk about. So we do this cool PR tour every year. We have been invited to the White House, we have Jewish Heritage Night with the Mets, the Red Sox, the Royals, the Orlando Magic, which has been awesome. And we've gone on to become the most publicized brand to come out of Shark Tank. So amazing. I think you could leave Shark Tank, and then that could be the peak, or you can use that as a jumping off point. And I think we tried to use it as a jumping off point.
So let's talk about that a little bit. In my discovery through the interviews that I've made, there's a couple of different ideas about what Shark Tank means to your business post-tank. And here's what I've seen. I'd love your feedback on this. And this doesn't have to do with anybody that has, had a deal, doesn't have a deal. They still have Shark Tank. They're in the Shark Tank family. That's how they look at it. Matter of fact, I think there's some contractual, and this is only me saying this, it might be wrong, that makes you have to put ABC or Shark Tank on your website and blah, blah, blah for a period of time. But there are people that I've spoke to that say, look, Shark Tank, I had an email last night from a guy that's got to delay his thing. And he's like, I got this in a priority. Nick, this is not, I can't do this right now. Plus Shark Tank's in my past. I'd love to talk about it someday, but I can't do it till and by the way, I haven't got very many of those. The entrepreneurs have been unbelievably, we have 60 something, 20 something more scheduled before we even get to the end of the month. We got to be done taping these at the end of the month. So I'm appreciative of that. But there are people that say after Shark Tank, one is, I don't want to promote Shark Tank anymore because I don't want people to think that's the only reason that my business is successful. That's one idea. The second is the people that are at trade shows. It's all blue. It's all Shark Tank. Their website is all Shark Tank. There's every picture of the sharks that they can put out. And they are promoting Shark Tank, and they talk about it all the time, and they love to do stuff like this and others to promote Shark Tank. And then there's a middle group, which I think is the largest group, that says, why don't dismiss Shark Tank? It was a part of building this business, and there was tons of positives, and it absolutely helped us. And so I don't have to, I don't have to canvas every part of my website or my product or whatever, but having a notation doesn't have to be a negative impact. Do you fall in any of those categories?
Yeah, I mean, I think I fall in the middle. Not everyone has a good experience, right? So there are people who go on and fail, and the edit is also not favorable,
right? And
that sticks with you, right? And you don't want that 1 hour of your life, and maybe you answered some questions poorly, or you cried, or you don't want it to define you, right? So I respect that. I also respect that for me, it was 5 years ago. For 1 hour, I talked to 5 people, and I've been talking about that since. But on the other hand, I would not be where I am today without Shark Tank, right? And so I use it for what's worth. And it's a tool for me that it launched my business. It helped get us into kind of the zeitgeist of pop culture, and it's been awesome. It's introduced me to all these incredible people, and anyone who calls me now and wants to talk, I say yes, right? Because I'm like, it wasn't that long ago I was a dude with a Jewish doll in my basement. So yeah, I'm happy to talk. And Shark Tank is the greatest door opener I've ever had. So I can call anyone about anything, and if they're like, oh, you're the Shark Tank guy from Mensch on Bench? Now, is it because I'm the Mensch guy or the Shark Tank guy? It doesn't matter, right? They're kind of amalgamated, and that's okay. The fact that people know it and have a positive view on it. I think as you get more and more press and more success, you can kind of put your ego aside. And for me, like when I do press and they're like, hey, do you want to come on and be on the show? Right? We had that talk with, like, let's say the Today Show. And it was like, hey, do you want to be on the Today Show? It's like, no, I want the Mensch to be on the Today Show. It's so much better for me to have them talk about the Mensch during Hanukkah than to talk about the Neal Hoffman story. Now, that Neal Hoffman story might impress that girl from high school who didn't want to go out with me and make me feel good, but it doesn't drive my business.
Right.
And I think you got to, over time, you start to realize, okay, what am I going to prioritize?
I think that and I'll close this part of it by just asking you this. I think you're a little bit different in the fact that Mensch took off. You've mentioned the hits. You mentioned the biggest, highest promoted in chart. So you're a little different because you've had massive, branding recognition, marketing, all of that stuff. But what I was having a discussion with one of the entrepreneurs about was, I'm not even arguing that Shark Tank, the interaction, what you did on the camera or not did, whether you got a deal or not, just the fact that you went through the process of going through. And by the way, if I'm a buyer out there for Bloomingdale's, right, and you say you're from Shark Tank, unless I'm completely, not with my game, I'm realizing that you went through a 4 to 6 month process. Most of everybody did this, or a huge percentage. They were lawyers and financial people behind the executive producers on the calls that say, we need this, we need a balance sheet, we need your P&L, we need all of this stuff. And what they're doing is they're determining whether you're a viable business to bring on the show. Doesn't that alone carry enough weight to go to a buyer and say, without the press that you had, and say, I was on Shark Tank, as in the conversation, right? Here's the things we've done. Oh, by the way, last summer we were on Shark Tank. if I'm a buyer, I'm thinking, well, they've done some of that due diligence for us. They've determined this business was good enough to put on the air, right? I don't know. I think I fall to the side of, man, I wouldn't put my whole, paint my house Shark Tank blue, but I would definitely keep it in my repertoire. No question about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I look at it as credentialing, right? So the number of people that go on Shark Tank every year is infinitely smaller than the number of people that graduate Harvard, right? So you're like, if I can find one of those people, they're like needles in haystacks.
Great point.
And that they had to jump through. Now, granted, some percent of those people were not picked because of great businesses, but they were going to be fun or funny or, it's a show.
Right.
Especially if you got a deal on Shark Tank, you made it through the 40,000 applicants. You made it to the 100 people who show. You made it to the 20 or 30% that get deals or 50% get deals, and half of those, again, that close. And you find those people, and you're like, whoa, you guys really are a small group, which is why when I get together we just did a filming for Laurie in Austin. Mm-hmm. And she brought some of her most successful and favorite companies down there to celebrate her billionth of dollar in business. And each one of those people were so amazing to talk to, right? Just sit down and hear their stories and shoot the shit with them. And to that degree, yeah, the credentialing of what you've had to do to get into that room, they're interesting people. Not always successful, and you might not agree with them, but they have really cool stories, and they've been able to do some really cool things. So you can learn from them.
That's awesome. So tell everybody, Neal, what is going on with Mensch? How has the product evolved since we saw it in the tank? Tell us everything about it.
See, Mensch on Bench, after Shark Tank, we gave him a facelift, so he's got his friendlier face. We have introduced his mother, Ask Bubby. So the Jewish grandmother doll, you ask her a question and she answers it. It's the voice of my own aunt. We've introduced the grandfather doll, Ask Papa. We have introduced a line of Mensch pets. So we did the dreidel dog. Right now we have the mitzvah moose. And coming out this year for the first time, the first Jewish snowman.
Oh, that's awesome.
Called the Snow Mensch.
That is awesome. Are we seeing the mother and the animal behind you on the shelf? Is that what I'm seeing there?
We've got the Jewish grandma's right
there
here.
She is. That's so cool.
Got
all right.
That's right there.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I'm just
continue
to have fun, put out new items to engage the Jewish community, and keep this brand going. Because I think we'll have peaked at Shark Tank. I don't think you'll ever recapture that magic of what happens when you're on the show, and Elf on a Shelf was at their peak at the same time. But I think we have the potential to be an evergreen brand that can continue to come out every year and delight their, core consumers.
That's awesome. Tell everybody where they can find Mensch on the Bench and all the other products. Is website, tell them retail. Where do we go?
A little bit of everything. TheMenschOnABench.com is our website. You can buy stuff there. Amazon, obviously, will be at Target, Bed Bath, Barnes & Noble, Michael's. And then our Facebook page, especially as we ramp up for the holiday season, we put a lot of funny pictures and content. We get user-generated stuff. And that's what's great about Mensch is it's not just me generating this anymore. It's taken a life of its own. So I get all these great pictures from all these families around the world, and it feels good, too, that people are using it the way you hope they would.
That's awesome. Well, listen, we really appreciate you being here. We've learned a lot. We're fans of your whole journey. It's really cool, and you have some great products and some new additions, which we're excited about as well. So, Neal, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Having me, and have a great Hanukkah.
We'll be back with more What Would You Ask podcast in a minute. Stay tuned.